Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Decided Heart Conversations. It is November, and we are just feeling so honored to have our special guest, Lisa Vartanian. She is a businesswoman. She's got so many things. Businesswoman, she's a speaker, and she is an author to The Price and Power of Freedom. And Lisa, we are just so happy that you're with us. Good morning.
Good morning, Sonia. Good morning, Hillary. It is a pleasure and an honor to share my journey of life with you two ladies in the hopes of, as we just discussed before the taping, changing lives and touching lives.
Yes.
It is really an honor. I thank you so much, because I think we are at a time in our life right now, in our history, where we are in need between COVID and the elections, and it feels like there's something new all of the time. That is, we can look at it in two ways, and we can go negative, we can go positive. Your journey is one of hope and optimism. Can you bring all of us along with you to how you came to be sitting in that seat you're in right now?
I call that life. And honestly, we always reflect to our beginnings as we get older. And I'll give you a little bit of history, a recap history due to time. I come from an Armenian family going back centuries, and my family ended up living under the Soviet Union totalitarian regime, relocating from Greece right after World War II. Life was very tough for them because there was an enormous government control. And my family, just watching them growing up, there was not a lot of conversation going on. And it wasn't your typical, oh, you're just a child and you don't count. I realized I was paying very close attention to my elders, and I came from a big community, aunts and uncles and family friends. And I realized there was a lot of silence. I wanted to know a little bit more about our history as a child for whatever reason. I don't know if that is my gift, or, when kids played outside, I always wanted to hang out around adults and just get to know some more serious information. And I realized I wasn't allowed. And that prompted me to ask many whys, and a lot of the answers were never answered. It was almost as if we had an unspoken agreement at one point in my life not to converse. There was a lot of silence. And there was very little political conversations, and I was enormously interested. And if I was lucky, I would hide in the next room or behind the door, just looking from the little crack to the adults in my life, my parents, my grandparents, and aunts and uncles, as I had mentioned. It was fascinating. I just didn't want to be seen, but I wanted to get as much information as I could. And America's name was mentioned from time to time, and freedom was in the sentence. I was fascinated, and I imagined, what would life be if I lived in America, in United States, a free America? And as a child, my imagination was incredibly satisfactory to me, because I just went above and beyond and just lived the dream of the unknown. And fast forward, because that's a long story, and I touched, in detail in my book titled Price and Power of Freedom. When we were blessed enough to immigrate to the land of the free, it took me many years to reflect on my childhood and those questions that I had always asked in my mind without answers or just simply imagined basically came to life. And I just wanted to understand truly what freedom is, because now I was part of it, especially when I became a United States citizen and I pledged my allegiance to the flag. Something happened. Those words, and I kid you not, I didn't understand the definition of the allegiance. Some of the words were foreign to me. I lived by a dictionary because, simple English language is very complex. And to try to learn it in your late teenage years is not easy. Intimidation is big part of it because you're always afraid you're gonna speak it incorrectly or say the words that are not fitting in a sentence or a conversation. So I used the dictionary, had become a good friend of mine, and the allegiance was a powerful, and I thought to myself, well, I need to ask a lot of questions and I need to find out my beginnings. The biggest revelation in my life was that Armenian race was the first race to accept Jesus Christ as their savior. Yet I did not know anything about it. And I was embarrassed because an American gentleman, had asked me of my nationality. And when I had answered, he said, "Did you know that your ancestors were the first Christians?" And my conversations usually were short, again, due to my language barrier. And I was on a listening end, and I just very shyly had answered, "No, I did not know that." And I was embarrassed by it. That was one of the main reasons I decided to write a book, because I thought, wow, this is freedom. You can find out anything. You can ask anything. You can share your deepest thoughts in a positive light. Because I realized that where I came from, a lot of people were angry and very bitter. And over many, many years of reading and researching and trying to really find out the history of this young nation, in my humble opinion, I really came to the conclusion of what freedom really is, where we have, each and every one of us, have talents and gifts given to us by a powers that most of us will never understand, but they're clearly there. And a constitution allows us to tap into those gifts and bring them out. And when you have that talent, and I promise you, most of us do that. We just don't know how and where. And this moment that I'm sharing my thoughts with you is a perfect example. Where now we're just sitting in our own little living rooms or office, yet we are in hopes, and I believe we will touch many, many lives, that all we have to do is tap inside and see what are our talents. And when we add the positiveness to it, it is a success already.
And what I want to celebrate, just this reflection right now, because Hillary and I have had many discussions previously about, the first one is obedience. And I really connect with you in terms of growing up, and there are these rules where you are not, to be an obedient child is to be valued. Like, just know what your role is and don't cross over that line. And there is a certain amount of courage to break that obedience. And so that was something that I really connected to you. The other thing that I feel like is so powerful in your story, something that Hillary brings up in terms of virtues, is curiosity. Because not everyone is as curious. And for you
Yes.
to be like accountable to your own curiosity since a child, like I have to know, I have to
Yes.
ask why. To me, that virtue like really carried you through to saying, I need clarity and I'm going to find it. Like,
And you know what, Sonia, I give that to the gift that I just mentioned. Nobody told me to be curious. Nobody explained me what, as I told you earlier, I was a child and I just needed to know my place. But I also believed in our situation, my parents feared quite a bit from big government. If they shared too much information, what would happen? And that is a story of its own. And I go again into detail in my book and why I cherish freedom and this great country. That curiosity is there as a gift. And children who don't have that curiosity, we adults have such responsibility, and it doesn't have to sometimes come from home. Unfortunately, people are caught up with their busy lives. Teachers, I believe, are enormous guidance and help. All a child has to do is just go to a teacher and just ask questions. And that teacher can bring out that curiosity in many children. And I believe most teachers and neighbors or uncles and aunts and family members, there's always someone. We're surrounded with many. Most of us are blessed to have elders that are wiser. And we just have to just take the time and we have to encourage children to do that. Because we all have ideas, many of them, and simple ideas. Yet when we are put together with mind alikes, 1 or 2 or 5, just amazing things are born. And we are able now to touch people globally. And every time I sell a book, as I mentioned in my book, one book at a time. And I have a line that I use regularly that says, I'm not a celebrity, a politician, or anybody of great importance, but I do reside in an exceptional land full of opportunities. And all we have to do is take advantage of the opportunities that are given to us.
right.
I have to say, Lisa, thank you so much for sharing in that perspective. Something that resonated with me a little bit ago as we were talking, and it has carried forward, and it really, really stood out to me, was the fact that when you were pledging allegiance for the first time and you had to look up the meaning behind the word allegiance and how that was so powerful for you, and that changed that moment for you. And it dawned on me how we take for granted so often. We've heard these things as rote since we were children, those of us who were born here in the United States. And so we forget the power of the very words and the meaning behind the words that we're saying. And to have your fresh perspective about, wait a minute, look, what exactly does that word mean? And there is sacredness, there's holiness in what we are doing every time we do that, that we sometimes lose track of and throw away and argue about, and again, just truly don't take into our heart. So along those same lines, just this remarkable lens that you're gifting us today to be able to have a different perspective and a different way of viewing our country. What is it? What are some of the things that you feel like the tips maybe that you could give to our listeners to say, yes, you may be taking this for granted right now, but there is a way to live a more positive life, a more optimistic life, and to really embrace all that we've been given here?
Well, I honestly have become an advocate for freedom. First and foremost, I clearly understand why people take this country for granted, because most of them have not seen anything other than what they know, and it's just understandable. So for me, freedom is very special because America, United States of America, is my adoptive homeland. And when you are an adoptive child to a family or to a country that you really truly love, you have a greater appreciation for it. And I have come out of my way to look up the great history of this young country. And it has been proven to me beyond any reasonable doubt that more successes have been born in this country, not because of anything special these people had. All they had was passion and understanding of the opportunities that are in this great country. That just being positive, first and foremost, definitely affects us. And when we have that positive light, it affects everyone who comes across us, our family, our friends, and many times complete strangers.
One of the things that I love that you mentioned, and this is like one of the tips for our listeners, is that there are free things here that we must, like, we're accountable taking. And the free things that you mentioned was kindness, compassion, and positivity. And you've really summarized that so well. And it really told me to say, you don't earn those things. You don't have to work for those things. You just get those things. And in order to get those things, you also give those things. So again, like, just reminding everyone, kindness, compassion, and being positive and optimistic, that's a mindset. And those are all free, right?
Yes. But unfortunately, Sonia, most of us, especially young children, don't know how to inquire those simple acts of kindness. I credit that to Tact Home. Children watch their parents and their surroundings like magnets. They just absorb everything. And we realize how much responsibility we have to be kind and compassionate. That's just human nature. And that's why God has gifted us with listening skills and conversational skills. Getting loud and unruly is just not supposed to be who we are. We are gifted those for defense mechanisms, and those should be the last resort when we feel unsafe or when we're being attacked, and not necessarily by another individual, but in different scenarios. Mm-hmm. And today, that is not the case, unfortunately. So I strongly believe and hope that my story is indeed powerful, because I've realized the responsibility that I share as a human being to touch just about everybody that comes my path.
Lisa and Sonia, I think for me, I know we have many tips that we've sort of talked about throughout this, but I truly believe, I think my biggest takeaway from what you're saying, and I truly believe it in my heart, and I know Sonia does as well, is really the idea of intention and being intentional about connecting with who you are, your gifts, your responsibilities, your kindness, and you are deliberately every morning with your devotionals and your intentions, waking up and filling yourself with the positivity and the joy and the faith and the optimism that you want to bring to the world, and you look for ways to bring that out in others. And I think if all of us can just take a second in this amazing country, as you said, to take the time to be that community for one another, to be the community that sees the best in one another, that brings out the best in one another, then I think that truly is the most amazing, beautiful use of freedom that we can possibly have. And so we thank you so much for the gift of your conversation, of your optimism today. And how can our listeners and watchers get a hold of your book? Because I bet they're going to want to just run out and grab that right away. So how do they get The Price and Power of Freedom?
So well said, Hillary. I appreciate that very much. And that was my intention. That has become my intention at this stage in my life, to touch everyone who not only crosses my path, but also reads my story. I call it my inspirational story, amongst a lot of sadness that has taken place in my life. So my book, Price and Power of Freedom, was self-published, and it is available on Amazon. I have a website called, right under my name, lisavartanian.com. You can either find that through my webpage, or you can go directly to Amazon and just, type the title, Price and Power of Freedom. And I thank you both from the bottom of my heart for your work, because you also have an enormous powers to make this world a better place.
Thank you, Lisa. I mean, for me, truly being influenced and impacted takes stories. And absolutely, I'm going to be running out, or actually online. So it can be instant ordering that book. And I think, I hope others as well. Like, to me, I'm kind of just in this silent transformation about hearing, your upbringing and what this country means. And then Hillary reminding me, what are the things that I've been taking for granted, and the sense of responsibility that I have. And Lisa, just so grateful for you. And we thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Oh, thank you so very much. And to all of our listeners, we will see you and hear you and be there for you next week.